Hello, my regulars, and welcome new listeners to the Reese on the Regular podcast. Today, I'm here with the wonderful Jenine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenine Wright. I own Fit Life, a wellness and fitness studio in Melrose, Massachusetts. I am a nutrition educator. I work with many different diverse clientele for nutrition coaching or personal training. And I just started a podcast recently called It's Already in You.
So
podcast.
Exciting. Everyone has to go and listen. Fun fact, Jenine actually inspired me to start my podcast. So I'm so excited to hear that she has her own podcast now, and it's awesome. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is going to be kind of what you talk about on the podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about truth versus trends when it comes to your food habits and healthy eating, and just how people are telling you what you want to hear versus the truth, because Jenine has a lot to share with us on that. She's been learning about it and studying it for a long time. I guess I want to start by asking, what started your passion?
Yes, so I want to say I have a 19-year-old now. When I was pregnant, of course, that's when, I've been in the fitness and wellness space for a very long time, over 30 years. And when I was pregnant, I just started really thinking about, what I was eating while I was pregnant and really thinking about it in a different way, in the 80s or 90s when you would exercise and your goal was to be thin and be fit, and you would eat things like, steamed broccoli and grilled chicken and Diet Coke.
Yeah.
Because there was no calories in Diet Coke. And that was like the healthy way to eat, right? Like the fit way to eat. I never really thought about it. When I got married, my sister-in-law was very, she just researched food and the way that other countries ate and the way their food system was. And she would tell us a lot of things, and we would think she was totally earthy, crunchy.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, what is she talking
term.
about, right? Yeah. My mother-in-law was diagnosed with cancer when I was pregnant with my second daughter. And I really dug my heels in and started to research what was going on in America, that we had so much disease, and it was so associated with our diet and our lifestyle. And as a wellness professional, I was like, what am I doing? Like,
Right.
I'm not helping anybody if I don't change their behaviors around food.
Right.
And I learned a lot. I researched, and I'm talking peer-reviewed literature. Like, I wasn't Googling things.
Right.
I was,
because we're going to talk about
yeah, 'cause
today.
we're gonna,
Not the truth on there.
Yeah. So, I really dug deep into what was different in Western medicine versus other countries, Europe and Asia, and the disease in those other countries compared to America. I read a lot of books. I watched a lot of documentaries. I even had to people think they hear something and they just take the word for it, especially if it's somebody that is a doctor or a nutritionist or a nutrition expert, right? And I didn't do that. I didn't take the word of anyone. Now I have a lot of people that I know, like, who to trust, and
Right.
who I know are looking through the research, the peer-reviewed literature, and seeing the difference. But I also think that, science can be funny. Like, today it could come out with something, and 5 years from now, we could see something totally different. Or if you don't know if the study was actually done well, if the subjects were good subjects, or, if there was a placebo effect, if it was double blind. There's so many things that you need to look at.
Right.
So I looked at a lot of things and studied a lot of things. And then I started, I was a health promotion director for a pharmaceutical company, of all things. I started doing seminars with the medical director. And we went deep down into the science of things, from the Krebs cycle. And then I started really thinking about how food affects us on a cellular level and how much disease it was causing. And it changed the trajectory of the way that I was going to coach people and educate people on nutrition forever.
And was this while you were still pregnant?
Yes. My mother-in-law passed the day after I brought my baby home from the hospital. Yeah.
That's really great that you were able to research that, having your first kids, and know that right away.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and I did a lot, like for them, I educated them a lot. So it was never like, you can't have this. It was, well, the reason why we don't choose these foods or these ingredients was mostly, like, I never really took any food groups out of my children's lives unless there was an issue, which
which
one
is
of my
important.
children, it's dairy. But it wasn't about taking any food out of their life. It was about them understanding that there is quality foods and then there's not quality foods. And those not quality foods are what I truly believe is making America sick.
Yeah, for sure. And I know we were just talking about how I spent the last 4 months in Europe and felt great, and suddenly don't feel great coming home. So it is really frustrating when we can't do much about it. But, the best thing you can do is your own research and educating your kids and things like that. So I think that's great.
Yeah. The hard thing is when a food affects you, it is, even if it's not an allergy, it is the same thing as an allergy. You can't have it. You know, you can't have a little red dye, number 40. You can't have some hormones and it be healthy, because at the end of the day, if it affects your body to the point where it makes you feel sick or gives you migraines or you have digestive issues or, the list goes on and on. There's so many things that are connected to food with us. Like I've had children that have stutters from artificial sweeteners or from dyes or behavioral issues or neurological stuff. Like the list is just, we could sit here all day and talk about how food is affecting us.
I know, we're worried this might be too long because there's so much to talk about. I think a lot of people do think of it as like, oh, you need to be diagnosed with some sort of allergy to have to eliminate foods and things like that. But I mean, even just for me, like a small intolerance to certain foods like gluten, dairy, I got to stay away from, even though I'm not celiac or allergic. It's just, those things don't agree with me. And
in America.
It's tough in America, and it's tough.
Yeah. Unfortunately, your gut health was affected by the American food system.
Right.
And now there's foods that you can't have because your gut is having a problem with digesting them. And, that's a big topic, gut health, and, trying to improve your gut health and trying to almost reverse the effects of this food system. But if you continue to eat toxic things, your systems are going to continue to give you that feedback of that you're not going to be able to eat certain foods.
Right.
I hear a lot of people say, oh, I started eating healthy and I felt worse than I did before. Well, that's a transition.
Yeah.
And, it's like anything that we do that isn't healthy for us. When you stop it, your body doesn't feel great. It's withdrawing from those things. There's so much to it, but if you go back to the basics and you think like you want things that are grown with the least amount of chemicals and the most conscientious farming practices, then you're going to start to heal not only your gut, but the environment around you. And, we're so connected to nature that people don't understand that that's where it begins, like our soil and our air, and then the list goes on and on.
It's such a big picture, the whole thing. And even just, people who say, oh, I tried eating healthy. It's like, do they even really know what that is because of all the miscommunication that goes on?
And there's misinformation, which I feel like obviously isn't intentionally put out there, right? It's you learn something and you believe in it. And, there's curriculum in college that's funded by the food system and food big business, and it makes me crazy when you hear things like mayonnaise is a good fat. Well, Hellman's paid for that.
Yeah.
I know I shouldn't pinpoint anything specifically, but like it's probably funded by the organization or the company, the business that is producing that product, right? Whereas like avocados are a good fat, right? Coconut is a good fat, but like those are things that nobody can create. They're already,
it's just,
they're in nature. So it's really hard, but there is disinformation out there too. And you have to be really careful. Like if somebody's making money off of what they're selling, a lot of times they're trying to find the backing for their information to sell their product or their book or their, Yeah. And that's where things, get a little
Get tricky.
sketchy and tricky. And it's sad because that's how that information gets out there.
So what are some recent food trends that you've noticed have influenced people's false perceptions and all that miscommunication when it comes to unhealthy versus healthy foods?
I think a big trend that's really getting under my skin right now is that where I see a lot of influencers and professionals that are saying things that people want to hear rather than telling them the truth to what they need to hear. So, for an example, there are foods that we love as Americans, and food is very cultural, and food is part of your upbringing, and it's part of your memories. Like I remember things growing up, like having Pop-Tarts on Saturdays or whatever. Like you remember these things, and so it becomes something more than just your nourishment, right?
Or it's like the nostalgia and how you're brought up.
Yeah,
it like all factors into it.
Right. And I think that some people want the reassurance that, I love Diet Coke. And, if I see somebody that is going to tell me how to get healthier, they're going to tell me I can never have that. So we've gone away from like, don't ever say never, like you can never say never. And I don't like it.
Yeah.
I think we're doing a disservice to people that we're working with. If you came to me and you were like, I eat Oreo cookies every day and I love them. Well, let's find something that may be homemade or better ingredients that you can eat that will make you feel like you are getting your cookie that makes you feel so great. But let's know that it's still sugar, no matter what the ingredients are. Right. And let's know that we can get a better ingredient, eat less of it, still feel that nostalgia and be excited about it, but do better for our body and our health. You know what I mean? Like
100%, yeah.
You don't need to eat the Oreo. And like you said, it is nostalgic. Like my kids, I didn't feed high fructose corn syrup and hormones and dyes, and we went to a farmer's market in Vermont, and I'll never forget how I felt. Like I saw a snow cone, and it was made with blueberries and maple syrup. And you would have thought I hit the lottery, like to give my kids a snow cone.
Yeah.
Or they had cotton candy that didn't have any dyes in it. And I was so overly excited about my kids being able to have that. Where like now in retrospect, I wish the education was more like, okay, but it's still sugar and it's not something that we should be so excited about.
Right.
We should be excited. And I am. When I look at a child's, I have a lot of friends that their kids are 2 and 3 years old and they're doing such an amazing job, like getting nutrients into these little bodies. Eating's a learned behavior.
Yeah.
So seeing a child eat nutrients is like the most beautiful thing in the world. Like when you really think how it affects cells, like you're talking about tissue, like deep layers of your body that are either going to prevent you from getting chronic illness and disease, or they're going to contribute to you getting chronic illness and disease.
Right.
And I think we're so scared of putting people on the defense or making people feel bad for what they've done that we now just let them hear what they want to hear so that they like us or they continue to follow us. And it's not my job to make you feel better about what you're doing. It's my job to teach you how you can feel better about what you're going to do. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And I know it's really hard, especially I think generationally.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
And we just did a podcast on this. Like, if you go out and you have a day where not everything was perfectly healthy, right? We tend to go within ourselves and say, I was bad this weekend.
Yeah.
And we just did this episode saying that, like, it's not you that's bad.
No.
But unfortunately, what you chose was not the best option, right?
That's all it is, yeah.
But you can't beat yourself up.
No.
You have to move on to the next meal and make better choices. Because what we tend to do is we say, okay, I was bad, so now I can't reverse that. So I'm just going to be bad till the end of December. And on January 1st, I'll be good. You know what I mean? Or on Monday, I'll stop being good. But then we have months or weeks or days that we could have made better decisions.
Right.
So reeling it back in and saying, okay, so I went out. It is what it is.
It's a new day.
I had fun, but it's the next meal. Or tomorrow's a new day. And I'm just going to now make better decisions or better than decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to reel it back in instead of having days or weeks of beating myself up about it.
Right.
But that should be the message, not, okay, well, that was okay. And you can do that whenever you want.
Yeah.
Because you should feel like you can, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot to be said. And it's because of diet culture and it's because of, eating disorders and all of those things, but educating people and learning the difference between, like, these are just really toxic ingredients versus if you want to have ice cream, choose the ice cream with the good ingredients.
Right.
And have a little less and enjoy and be mindful about eating it and take your time, right? Like, and make it be a good experience.
Yeah.
Rather than always having this like internal fight with yourself.
And I definitely think a lot of it is generational for sure. Did you ever run into any issues like as your kids were growing up and social media is becoming a bigger thing and the generations changing of like what you taught them when they were younger?
I have to say I'm really lucky because I started immediately,
Mm-hmm.
right? I have a lot of parents that will say, you've done this since the beginning. I have an 8-year-old. Try telling an 8-year-old that the hoodsy at school that everybody else is eating is not okay anymore, right? I mean, my kids at some points were telling me, like, Mom, I don't think we should have that. There's probably GMOs in it. Like, we'd be at places where I'd have not a lot of control, and we'd have to make choices that were within our abilities at that point. And a lot of times my kids would say, I'm not gonna eat that, so go find me a farm-to-table restaurant or find us somewhere we could eat. We're gonna just eat when we leave. And I'd be like, wow, okay.
Yeah, it's so rare.
But then you run into teenage years, consistency is important. But I also tell my parents, when you give in to anything and it's bedtime or a movie or whatever it may be, as soon as you give in to that, you're opening that door because you're saying it's not that bad, right? Yeah. Like, so you can stay out till 11:30 instead of 11, and then all of a sudden that's their new time that they're coming home, right? It's the same thing with anything like that. Discipline, bedtime, food. If I opened the door, and I did for some things. Like I would say, okay, well, I'm not going to ever tell you that fast food is good for you. But there are some places that do a better job with it, right? Like Chipotle tries to stay away from hormones and GMOs and certain things. So that was our choice for fast food, Now years have gone by and I've learned more. And that's the other thing. My kids are like, oh no, she's learning more.
Yeah.
They see me researching or they see me in a course and they're like, something's going to happen now. But at some points you have to say, like, we live in this country and we have to always think that we have to make the better than choice because it's culture, it's society, and there's only so much that we can do. So I want them to be able to go to restaurants that they can afford with their friends. Right. And so if it's Chipotle over the other worse options, then that's what I have to accept and be good with. But I have to say, for the most part, I feel really good about what they've learned. Now I have a college student, so she hates the food at school, but we have no choice.
It's tough.
She chooses mostly vegetarian, and does the best she can with it.
Are there any specific strategies you use or that you've tried to teach your daughters when it comes to grocery shopping, planning your food, cooking it, and especially with your daughter being in college?
Yes. So being prepared, as you know, freshman year you have no choice. You're paying that big amount of money for the biggest meal plan that you can get at school. But as you're there for a while, and then when you move into your apartment, and then you have better options and better choices.
Right.
Obviously. But I tell them that they need to be prepared, right? If you're out and you know you're going to be out all day and you don't have access to healthier options or better options, then you're going to end up making worse choices, right? But meal prepping is not for everybody, especially younger people that are, you know, they don't have structure. I mean, you're a little different. Like, I watch you and I'm like, oh, if everybody could be like Reese. But the truth of the matter is not everybody has that discipline, right? Unfortunately, you have that discipline because you've not felt good when you don't have that discipline.
Yeah. Sometimes you need a reason to cook your own food.
Some people don't know. They can't associate what they're taking in or what they're putting on their body or what's surrounding them with how they're feeling, right? Some people could get migraines or stomach issues and they don't associate it with food.
Right.
They just have I think we have a big disassociation with how much nutrition affects us, how much food affects us. But if you can start thinking about, maybe you're not a meal planner for 7 days. Maybe you're a meal planner in the morning for the day. Maybe you're okay, I am going to be eating out. And maybe you're a restaurant planner, you know, and you start thinking about, all right, where am I going to go? What is the best option that's around me? And what are the best choices at that restaurant? And how can I make it better, right? Yeah. Maybe that's what you start with. Maybe you start with just adding things onto your plate, and it starts to crowd out the stuff that's not that great, right? And I've worked with, I say that there's a spectrum. And, you know, here you're like eating fast food every single day. And on this end of the spectrum, you have like got it down. You're meal planning, you're, you know, making all those great choices. But wherever you fall on that spectrum, you can always get better. You can always continue to make things better than they were before, right? But I think that you just need to, again, look at it like, if I bring something into my diet that has so many nutrients and I start to feel like, wow, I wasn't craving anything, or, you know, I wasn't hungry, like the satiety was good, I must be doing something right, then the stuff that's not that great will start to go away. You know, there are people that we have to start really slow with. There are people that will come to me for coaching or come to a seminar and hear all these things, and they'll take a garbage bag and start emptying pantries and refrigerators, and they're like, I'm never going back, you know?
Sounds like my mom.
And then there's other people, though, that will like, well, I have to finish this before I start the new ingredient one, you know? Like, and it's very interesting that the span, obviously, is across the board and across the spectrum of where we are, and we have to respect that. And it's with anything like lifestyle changes, right? There's people that can go work out every single day and they're moving every day and they just have that. It's part of their calendar. It's on their calendar. I'm working out every day at 10. And there's other people that are like, I went 3 times this week and that's great.
Yeah.
You went 3 times, right? Like you didn't go at all last week. It is trying to make it into a lifestyle. It's trying to make the changes happen so that they become part of our life and not a burden to us, you know. And if that means starting really slow and adding things in, if it means just drinking more water, right? For the first 3 weeks, all I'm going to do is drink more water in a glass jar from a filter. But that could be what it is. I also, not to plug this, but to plug this, I have a journal coming out, and it's called Live Better. And it's just like resources and like things to help you think about what you do on a daily basis to start making these small little changes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Like a journal, like book type thing that you wrote? That's awesome.
Yeah. I know. I'm really excited about it, but it's hard for me because I don't want it to be like something I have to sell, but I have to pay for it to be. So this is where like it's hard, right? Because do this from my heart. Like when I teach seminars or I do get paid because it is my profession, but it's one of those things where I don't like that piece of it, because my passion is to like make your life better, make you thrive in life. And people will say, oh, so you want to live till you're like 100? It's not that.
No.
I don't, it's not the number, it's the quality, right?
You want
like,
to feel good while you're here.
I want to feel good. I want to watch the people that I love grow old and be able to ski down a hill when they're 80 and feel great about it, and not be living their life trying to figure out how they're paying for their medicine, or the things that they have to do to catch up with the health that they could have been working on the whole time, right? Yeah. So, and I hope that we're heading in this direction in Western medicine, that we're going to start focusing on better prevention and better lifestyles, because it's going to save us on healthcare. It's just, there's so much to this that I really wish it was more in the front of people's minds.
Right. A lot that people don't think about because they just don't know. Well,
and it's inconvenient at first, right?
The convenience, the cost. Yeah. I mean, even you're saying, you don't want to have to put a cost on a journal like that, but food that's healthier, the costs and things like that I feel like people run into, so they just avoid it for the convenience.
Yeah. And a lot of it is common sense, because of the amount of information that's thrown at us day to day, right? I'm really educated in this area, and I will open social media and, whether it's I'm feeling like, I'm not as energetic as I was, or I'm going through perimenopause, or, I've gained a little weight because I'm at that stage of my life, right? Every single thing on social media is supplements that are like wiggling back and forth in front of you, like lose more weight, feel more energy, like anything that I feel is like on social media in my face.
They just have found a way to market everything where
it's incredible.
You fall for it so fast.
And even the most educated of us that know better, I always use this example, like after I had a baby and I'm seeing like Daisy Fuentes talk about Windsor Pilates. Like I'm an exercise physiologist, nutrition educator, like teach Pilates. Like I still, like at 2 a.m. feeding my baby, was thinking, I want to look like her.
Yeah.
I should buy that program, right? Like, and of course then you're like, okay, I know this is like way too good to be true.
Yeah.
Right? But there are things that are on the market that may work for a short period of time.
Right.
And then they can affect our health in negative ways. I think people find a hard time putting health first. It's more a vanity thing a lot of the times. Like, so until you start to feel your health decline, you're just looking for the easiest, fastest way to the way you want to look.
Right.
On the outside.
Yeah.
I wish that we could see the way that we're looking on the inside.
Yeah, I know. Wouldn't that be awesome?
It would change us. I mean, it's like exercise. If you could exercise and get a result immediately, think about how much more you would exercise, right? When I teach an IQ, I feel the muscles that I'm supposed to be engaging and connecting to. And I always say to everyone, like, it's so amazing when you really connect and you're mindful of what you're doing. You think like, I'm going to lift my shirt up and it's going to be like an 8-pack. Like that's how strong I feel and how good I feel, right?
Yeah.
If we could somehow start to put that together with like, if you start to add nutrient dense foods into your life and you take away like calorie dense, no nutrient availability of foods in your diet, you're going to start to feel so much better. It's like, and you will look better, right? And you will age slower and you will be more fertile and you will, like there are so many things. And I wish that people were taught this throughout their life.
Exactly. Because if they were, then it would be more of an immediate thing for people.
Yes.
It wouldn't just be this convenience that everyone lives on.
It's so hard.
It's
so hard. And like, because I never want to make people feel bad.
No,
right?
And there's not enough people like you who are educated where it's like, okay, everyone's just going to listen to that,
Yeah.
you know?
It's hard.
Mhm.
But then there are people that you think are so educated
Uh-huh.
and you get caught up in it.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be a critical thinker, and not everybody is. But like you have to really think about like, like that person says beans are bad and that person saying that vegetables can kill us. And, you know, and then you have to step back and you have to say, wait a second. There are some countries that their major intake, like their most intake is vegetables.
Right.
And for hundreds and thousands of years, we have seen that they're the healthiest places on the planet, right? Like there's something called blue zones. Did you ever hear of that?
No.
So I think there's 5, and I could be wrong. I have way too much information in my head. There's even a documentary or a series on Netflix right now about the blue zones.
Really?
Yeah, and it's really interesting. But Sardinia, Italy,
Mm-hmm.
Okinawa, Japan is one of them. Costa Rica is another. There's one place in America, and it's in California. I think it's Loma Linda. But these places, they look at their lifestyle and what they take in as far as nutrition goes. And the things that are all similar in all of these places lead to the healthiest centenarians. Is that how I say that? How do you say 100-year-olds?
Oh. I don't know.
It's one of those words you can never
Honestly,
say.
don't even know the word.
So it's they've made it to 100 years old, but they're the healthiest
Mm-hmm.
of that age group.
Yeah.
And they notice that they eat mostly plants.
Mm-hmm.
They have really good relationships and community. You know, their stress level is not high. They take care of themselves by doing things that are self-care. You know, they don't drink a lot. They move every day. Like so there's like these little pillars of the way that they care for themselves and their community, and these are the healthiest places in the world.
That's so, I've never heard of the blue zones.
Yeah.
It's cool.
You're
But
gonna have
it
to
is
look
that
that up.
common sense of like people could just look into that, and why would you think vegetables are bad when there's those statistics out there?
Right. I mean, and we've known this since.
I mean, yeah, that
You
is
know.
just common sense alone. You shouldn't even have to know
Yeah.
about the blue zones, but
But to not be hypocritical, we've also been seeing milk does a body good for
Yeah.
a long time, right? But that is advertisements.
Mhm.
And that's the difference,
Yeah.
right? Like that is a big industry. And then I think this is a really good point to bring up is that we have to remember that you have industry in America that is very tied politically, and there's lobbyists and there's a lot of money around it, and that's when things get skewed. But you see something that has been, you know, told to you that has been healthy for the longest time, and it's been marketed to you that way. And if you saw the commercials, like back in the beginning of when commercials were starting to be a thing for industry about dairy, like, I mean, there was a commercial that showed like, and it was like geared towards kids because like you're eating your cereal, and if you don't drink your milk, like you have really bad
my
bones.
doctor
and, like,
used to yell at me all the
Oh
time.
yeah, and somebody's outside like, and all their bones are like, breaking. Like that was the ad, you
my
know. And I'm like, oh, this is terrible.
Terrible.
Like, but there used to be ads for doctors smoking Camel cigarettes, and so you really got to think about where it's coming from. But there's also the other side where when something starts to be acknowledged by society, like, maybe that isn't the healthiest thing that we should be putting in our body, then they attack the opposing. So like, do you remember soy was getting such a bad name for a little while? Organic soy products have been eaten in Southeast Asia that's their main part of their diet. And there's very little cancers over there. There's very little diabetes. And if you've never read the China studies, that's something that's very interesting. But they look at like epidemiological studies, and these are like real life for years, watching the way people live and the outcomes of how their lifestyle has been, what they've eaten over years. So if you say to yourself like, oh, that doesn't sound right, it probably isn't right.
Right.
You know, or if that sounds too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. Supplements are probably $1 trillion industry now.
Mhm.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
I know 10 years ago, the statistic was like a $90 billion industry. So we're definitely beyond
there.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah. And 5% of Americans are nutrient dense, like are nutrient efficient,
Yeah.
are getting what they need. 5%. And you're talking $1 trillion industry in supplements. So supplements aren't giving us what we need.
No. So it's just important to look at the results in people's lifestyle and what they're eating. And that's really the best way to determine the truth.
Yes. Yeah. And knowing there's place for things,
Mhm.
right? If you have a deficiency, there are very good quality third-party whole food supplements that you can, put a little bit more trust in. And if you have a deficiency, then you can use those things to help you. But that's the other thing is we're not testing the way that we should be for deficiencies and knowing what people need. And, the numbers are like moments in time, and trying to figure out what's going on with our health is really, we need more diagnostics and more preventable ways to tell what people need,
Yeah.
So it is hard, it's difficult. But if you eat a whole food, nutrient rich diet, I don't think you need to even think of anything else. You need to focus on that first.
Mm-hmm.
Start there.
When it comes to other things that you're purchasing when you're grocery shopping, ingredients lists, things like that aren't just these whole foods, what is your advice for navigating through all these ingredients? Because I know you can pull something out of an ingredients list that people don't really think of.
Yeah. I would say being able to identify the ingredients is first and foremost. So if you don't know what something is,
Can't pronounce it.
If there's a lot of ingredients on a label, then you probably should just avoid it. Yeah, it's a red flag. It's hard because there's so much label craziness out there. There's health claims on food products. And as far as I'm concerned, if it comes in a box, a bag, a can, you can't listen to the health claims. So that's the best thing you can start with, right? Maybe if it is a whole food, what it says on the package might have some truth in it. But for the most part, labeling is to get you to buy the product. So you're looking at the number of ingredients, you're looking at the ability to understand what the ingredients are and if you can identify what they are. Michael Pollan says if it wasn't in your grandmother's cabinet or your grandmother doesn't know what it was, you probably shouldn't buy it.
Yeah.
And I love that. If it was made in a plant, you shouldn't eat it. But if it was made by a plant, you can. He has some great quotes. And there's a lot of things out there that we should definitely be avoiding completely. But, I'm going to say that organic is your best option. It's your better than option. Is it like the most optimal in this country? People are always saying like, oh, well, I heard that they do this to organic food. At the end of the day, I have to trust that it is better than industrialized factory made foods, right? Like that there is some wholesomeness and that it's still the better option, right? So if we go down that rabbit hole of, well, I heard Trader Joe's lies about these things, all right, you're going to get yourself so crazy that you're not going to be able to make those decisions.
Right.
So you have to come to terms with the fact that we do live in America and that we have to make the best choices we can make. Farmers markets are great, but they're also Americanized. They're turning into these places where like people are selling, anything that they are selling. Like it makes me so mad. Like farmers markets should be natural.
Right.
You shouldn't show up at a farmer's market and see M&Ms and a cookie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like real dark chocolate chips, or find like
they've become like fairs and
it's sad. It's like, but you do want to support local, and local is like the less miles that food has to. I mean, again, we could have 22 episodes on all the different things, but if it is local and you can speak to the farmer and you can know their practices, that's always going to be the best, because you're supporting that farmer, you're voting with your dollar, you're also getting better than what is going to the grocery store that's traveled 1,000 miles.
Right.
But you do want to know, like, it's great to know where your food's coming from and what their practices are. But a lot of farmers can't afford to get the USDA organic label or to go through the processes that they need to get there. So that's the other issue. But I do still believe that choosing local but organic is going to be the best choice that you can make.
Yeah. Do you feel like anyone has ever come to you with certain foods or things that they found that they kind of misunderstood as organic, or like any misleading labels that you can speak on?
Yeah. So the labeling is tough. A lot of things say non-GMO now that are not, there's non-GMO verified, and then there's non-GMO ingredients, and then there's organic label, and then there's organic ingredients, and then there's how much of it has to be,
Right.
And again, you could go crazy. But if you're trying to stick to 100% non-GMO organic foods, then the USDA organic label needs to be on the product, the food, the package. And it's hard, right? Like, you see farm fresh and you think, oh, it's farm fresh, so it's going to be non-GMO, right? No, not necessarily. So it's really hard. 90% of corn in America is genetically modified. 90% of soy is genetically modified. Alfalfa, now beets are the getting up there in how much we have that's genetically modified. So these are the crops you have to be careful of. And then there's ingredients in foods that absorbic acid comes from corn, but you might not know that, right? So again, I would say you want to see that it is certified non-GMO or non-GMO verified, rather than just saying that there's non-GMO ingredients. Right? Because if they say that, then some of the ingredients can be non-GMO, but then some of the ingredients can be GMO, and you wonder why they do that, but then it's a cost.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, they can put that on there because it's not lying, but it's not the full truth.
Right. Natural is a terrible label. Like, everybody's like, well, it's natural. Or I hear all the time, I bought it at Whole Foods.
Yeah.
That doesn't
store, I know. Store doesn't say much either.
Yeah, it doesn't. They're a business and they have to make money, right? And however they're going to do that, they have to do that. And it's unfortunate, but again, I feel like you want to try not to get so caught up in that. Like, if you can't even deal with looking at that stuff, if most of your food is vegetables and whole foods, you're better than eating a lot of processed and ultra-processed foods, because that's our biggest problem in America. I mean, 60% or more of our diet is processed foods.
Crazy.
That's so crazy. Yeah. There's a book, Ultra-Processed People. It's really good. You should read it. It's a doctor from the UK is trying to get his twin brother, who's also a doctor, to stop eating ultra-processed foods. Now there's an acronym, UPF, we call it, because now not only are we seeing that the American diet is processed, but now it's ultra-processed. So we're taking it to the next level. Like, our bodies are not doing any of the things they're supposed to do.
Right.
Digesting, like, that whole process is where we get our nutrients from. So if it's like eating already digested food. Yeah.
That's weird to think about.
Weird to think about.
It sounds like it'd be a good book.
It was interesting.
And your journal.
I listened to it.
You've definitely done a lot more research than me, but I do feel like I've had to do a lot of research, like I talked about with just my own diet and having to learn what really works well with my body and what doesn't. My diet has changed a lot over the years. I probably ate like 90% processed food, like when I was younger and growing up, and just eating all the things that kids eat. My diet was so different. I definitely think a lot changed when my mom met you. And when your daughters would come over. And no, my mom started to become really aware. So she did make a lot of changes in our house, which was great. But I was still having a lot of troubles. And so I went to more of a holistic nutritionist. And that's where I learned a lot about what things weren't agreeing with my body. So I started to get into cooking for myself and cutting out certain things, and definitely felt a lot greater. And so it's been really great, but at the same time, I do feel like it's tough with social media and all the false information out there. Yeah. But it's good to learn so much today and to know that there's resources out there, Netflix and books and your own stuff that you're coming out with. And you guys have to go and listen to her podcast, because we could talk forever about this topic. There's really just so much to say. And so I guess I want to end this off and just asking any, additional resources that people can use at this point to make research easier on them.
Yes. Well, I mean, your listeners can also always reach out to you and ask you how you've made these changes. And
of course,
sometimes your peers, it feels good to know what they've done to make positive changes and have outcomes that have been so great.
I already do feel like a lot of my friends are always like, how do you do it? And they try and do it with me sometimes. Yeah. And it is tough, but I mean, when it makes you feel better, it's so worth it. And it just becomes a habit for sure.
And you post a lot on
meal
planning and meal prepping and stuff like that. And I love it. Not everything is going to be 100% right. So I just always want to preface it with that you have to critically think. But I do believe that there's a lot of information out there that you can start to look into. Like you said, there's Netflix documentaries that I do just think start opening your eyes to what's going on. Food Inc. was a huge documentary for people in the United States that they started to see that was like one of the first documentaries that showed what's going on in our farming and factory farm. I read Organic Manifesto, one of the first books that I read that is written by Maria Rodal, and it's Rodal Institute. They're the first organic farm in America. It's pretty cool.
That's cool.
She's that book was awesome because it just makes you think of what's supposed to be going on in our food system and farming and how it's so not that, right? Mm-hmm. Everything that's at a farm contributes to everything that's supposed to be there, right? You can't just have corn growing at a farm. You need to have animals that are fertilizing the soil and having really good oxygenated soil. There's so much to it. And do it in pieces, right? Double click on something and listen to it and critically think about it and watch a documentary, and then that documentary will lead to something else. Or if you like to read, Michael Pollan is a journalist that really dove into the nutrition world and the food system, and I think he's opened a lot of eyes and made a lot of things happen, positive things happen. So there's a lot of resources out there, and if they want to email me or you want to share my email,
I will attach everything. I definitely think it's important to do what works for you, whether that is listening to a podcast or reading a book, because you don't want it to start to feel like a chore. It should be something that you find an interest in some way, shape or form. And it's great that there are all those different resources out there. Just finding what works for you is the most important part, and hopefully gaining an interest in it, finding yourself diving deeper into it, because I feel like that's kind of how you started. It was just a little something, and now it's become your passion.
Yes.
So that's awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming on, and I'm going to share everything with you guys. This was awesome. I learned so much. I want to have you back on.
Maybe we can ask them what they want to talk about specifically.
Yes.
So we can focus in, zoom in on something that.
Yes, this was definitely big picture overview, but please comment and give feedback on what you guys specifically want to hear about when it comes to your health and nutrition and really anything in that matter. But this was so much fun.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, keep listening, keep watching, give all the feedback, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.